Recording has started, so you go right ahead.
All right. So hi, I'm Angelina Dalle. I'm from Darien High School, and I'm presenting on the efficacy of BCARMS virtual tracking system in quantifying symptoms of multiple sclerosis. So a little bit about multiple sclerosis. It is an autoimmune disorder, and it affects the myelin sheath of the neuron. So a neuron is a cell, and this is what sends and receives the signals in your body. So it's kind of how your body and your brain communicate with each other, vice versa. And demyelination, as you can see here, is the lesions and scarring on the myelin of the axon of the neuron. So the axon is where the signal is sent from the neuron, and the myelin sheath is a special type of plasma membrane that helps conduct these signals down the axon, so that makes these signals travel quicker. So in demyelination, this can impact the signals that are being sent in the neuron. So common symptoms of multiple sclerosis are memory and concentration issues, balance and coordination, dizziness issues, bladder weakness, numb sensations, mobility issues, and weaknesses in your limbs. What the body does is that it sees this myelin, this plasma membrane, as a foreign substance, and it begins to attack your own myelin sheath, and that is what causes multiple sclerosis to the best of our knowledge right now. Right now, there are more than 2.8 million people that have multiple sclerosis, and I say more than because it's very likely that more people have not been able to be diagnosed. 75% of these people are female. The heritability is kind of varied right now because we don't know very much about multiple sclerosis. It's from 35% to 75%. Right now, the most advanced system of tracking and diagnosing multiple sclerosis symptoms is the EDSS or FSS. EDSS stands for Expanded Disability Symptom Scale, and FSS stands for Functional Symptoms Scale. So these are 8 areas: the pyramidal, cerebellar, visual, cerebral, sensory, brainstem, bladder, and other. So they are each on a scale of 1 to 10. So let's take visual as an example. Visual being on a 1 would be the worst vision you can possibly have, near blindness. 10 would be perfect vision. So that's repeated for each of the areas. This is done in a in-person multiple sclerosis center, typically once a year, or for multiple sclerosis diagnosis. This is done by a healthcare professional, and it takes around 90 minutes. This will be important later on in the presentation. Right now, there is no cure for multiple sclerosis. Treatments can be anything from steroids to just keeping track of your symptoms. And there are 4 main types of multiple sclerosis. The first one is not included in this presentation. It is clinically isolated syndrome, or CIS, and that is just one-time symptoms of multiple sclerosis. This can or cannot lead to future multiple sclerosis. We're not very sure. Then there is RRMS, or relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, and this is characterized by that staircase you see. So there's a period of relapse, remission, and then etc. There is SPMS, or secondary progressive multiple sclerosis. This is characterized by that initial staircase, so relapse and remission, and then a gradual worsening of multiple sclerosis. And then finally, we've got primary progressive multiple sclerosis, and that is just kind of characterized by almost a line. It is just this gradually worsening multiple sclerosis. So for my review of literature, I've got health-related quality of life for patients with progressive multiple sclerosis, influence of rehabilitation. So this was a rather old journal article, but it was talking about how when compared to patients that did not have that in-person rehabilitation, people with rehabilitation who have multiple sclerosis had much higher energy, had much less fatigue after this study was conducted. The Dunning-Kruger effect on being ignorant of one's own ignorance will come up later in my discussion, and this is when I was investigating cognitive biases to see why my hypothesis was not supported, which I will cover later. 3 weeks of rehabilitation improves walking capacity but not daily physical activity in patients with multiple sclerosis with moderate to severe walking disability. This is a little bit self-explanatory as by the title, but 3 weeks of rehabilitation, which is a rather short period of time, did increase that walking capacity in those with MS, but not necessarily that physical activity in those with MS. So it'd be interesting to see why that happened, and this is much more recent. The last one is factors influencing the disconnect between self-perceived health status and actual health profile, implications for improving self-awareness of health status. So this is one of the few journal articles in this area, which is very interesting, and it's what my hypothesis and problem statement are kind of based around. It's talking about how those that are more confident in their self-perceived health status, regardless of their actual health, are much less likely to go out and reach and reach out for medical assistance. So it was interesting to see why that could happen and how that can possibly have implications specifically in those with chronic diseases, illnesses like multiple sclerosis. So my problem statement was, how does the quantitative neurological application assessment correlate with a patient's perception of their function? The hypothesis was that this quantitative neurological application assessment, which I will cover in my methods, will correlate with the patient's perception of their function. What this means is that the results from the app that was used in the participants' study will correlate with how people felt they did. And this is important because, as I said earlier, as people have more of an idea of how they are actually doing, they are more likely to go out and get help, which is very important because people with multiple sclerosis could be having difficulty walking, they could be having difficulty memorizing things, and they wouldn't necessarily know that they have that difficulty unless they are aware of how they are doing. A little bit more about the application. BCareMS is an online application. It can be downloaded free on Android and iPhone. It's from the company BCareLink. Right now, this is their only application. It focuses on 13 activities. So there's the mood check-in, visual contrast, code, tug, 25-foot walk, transcription, Stroop, 6-minute walk, tap, path, arm elevation, vibration, and memory. So each of these games correlates with the EDSS scale areas that I was discussing earlier. So the visual contrast correlates with those visual functions. These are gamified, as you can see here on the side. There's the tiger that you can drag along a path. That one's called path, and that one tests motor abilities and those pyramidal functions. These are more gamified ways of checking these EDSS scales. All of these activities take an estimated of 15 minutes, and they can be done in the comfort of your own home, as opposed to having to drive to a multiple sclerosis facility and having to go through those 90 minutes of EDSS testing. 120 participants were selected for this study. They were given $25 as compensation. The criteria for them was that they had to be above 15 years old. They could not have multiple sclerosis, so we could have a control group. And they also could not be at risk for falling, as some of the activities did include a 6-minute walk. So there wasn't a lot of physical exertion, but they also couldn't be at risk for falling, so we didn't harm anyone. So participants were asked to download the app, complete the 13 activities listed, and then they were asked a questionnaire, which is the bottom image. They were asked their user ID, the dates that the activities were completed, and then on a scale of 1 to 10, how they felt they did. So 1 being poor, 10 being perfect, 11 questions were asked. The questions each correlated with the games. So for example, one of the questions could be, on this given day, how did you feel that your arm strength was? Or on this given day, how did you feel that your walking stamina was? And this was rated on a scale of 1 to 10 and asked of each of the participants after they completed these 13 activities. So this is one of 3 result slides. First, we've got these KDE plots. You can see that there are 12 of the 13 activities. This is because the mood check-in did have a data collection issue, so it was not included in the results. So on the x-axis, you can see the scores of the games through the app. And then on the y-axis, you can see the scale of the Google form questionnaire. As you can see, most of the data on all of the games, which are represented as arm, is arm elevation, 6 is the 6-minute walk, TWE is the 25-foot walk, UPA is tug, PAT is path, TRA is transcription, STR is Stroop, TAP is tap. Cognitive test was one of the memory tests, memory was the other memory test, VIB was vibration, and ISH was the visual contrast. So as you can see, the data is kind of concentrated in that upper y-axis of the higher end of the questionnaire, regardless of how people actually did on the app. So people tended to think that they did a lot better than they actually did. This is also shown with each of the individual linear regressions. So again, with the same games being each of the same abbreviations, and there is not a very high correlation here. It wasn't indicative of anything really. There was very low correlation, which is seen in the last result as well. So this is switched. The x-axis is representative of the Google form, so 1 to 10 again, and the y-axis is the app results. The app results were normalized and this linear regression was created. The R value for this was 0.06, so there was a very low correlation. And you can again see that all of these results, or most of these results, are all concentrated on the higher end of the scale, regardless of how they actually did in the app. So for a little bit of discussion. A lot of errors could have been done in this study. One of them is a voluntary response. These people were collected through forums. They were asked to voluntarily participate in the study. There was a relatively small sample size of 120 people. It was not monitored, so people did this in their own homes. There could have been technological difficulties. And a possible explanation for the results of the study, as my hypothesis was not supported, is a cognitive bias. So this could be the overconfidence bias or the Dunning-Kruger effect. And this is where people are a lot more confident regardless of their accuracy. Or the more they know, the less confident they are, and vice versa. So that would take further investigation. This could be done by using different measures, so accuracy versus duration. This could also be done by sending a questionnaire before the participants do the study rather than afterwards to see how confident they are in each of the activities before they are actually done. There's a lot we can do to further this study. And in terms of my acknowledgements, Dr. Lichman, my mentor, Mr. Pratt, Mr. Lewis, my parents, and all research involving human studies was conducted under the supervision of my mentor, and informed consent was received beforehand, and all of the responses were de-identified through their usernames. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciated your